Hey guys, I bet you've seen a lot of isekai animes, but I'm sure you've never seen one like this before. Here's the story. A man who has been known since childhood as a prodigy in sweet making goes to a competition to see who can create the most beautiful sweet. Unfortunately, the peacock-shaped sweet he makes falls on him, and, being very heavy and hard, ends up sending him to the other side. After that, he is reborn as a boy, and his dream is to make lots of sweets in that world, but for that, he'll need to learn magic and martial arts first. And that's the story I'm going to tell you today. But first, give me a like here on the video and subscribe. It really helps me out. Okay, let's go to the recap. The anime starts by showing our protagonist in his past life. He's in a sweet competition which will decide who the world's best pâtissier is. For those who don't know, a pâtissier is someone specialized in the creation and making of sweets, desserts, and the like. We see here that he is known as the god pâtissier. In the grand final of the competition, he decided to make a beautiful big bird, and he was confident he would win the competition. However, at some point, his giant sweet falls right on top of him, seriously injuring him. Lying on the ground, losing his life, he laments and says he would have liked to create the world's best sweets before going to his grave. He says that God is very cruel to make him go out this way. And at that moment, a voice speaks to him and says that it will give him a new chance. It tells him his new name in this other world, which is a very long name, so we'll just call him Pastry, which is his first name. And then, we already see him with his new parents. And after a time skip, Pastry is now a bit older. He explains to us a bit about that world. He says his father is the Lord Suzerain of a region. However, the place where they live is very arid, and it was impossible to grow wheat or barley. His father worked hard alongside those who followed him and those who already lived in the area, and, after many years, they were able to make the soil in that place fertile. The work paid off, and they quickly managed to create large plantations that fully supplied the residents of that region. After this quick explanation, we see Pastry training swordsmanship with his father. He is already 9 years old, and yet he is the best with the sword after his father. Everyone sees him as a prodigy. He explains that his father is a military hero, and his mother is a kind and gentle lady. He says that it really is a peaceful village, but something bothers him a lot, which is the fact that their fief can't grow sugarcane to make sugar, and so it's very difficult for him to make sweets, which has always been his dream since his past life. While he's training, he starts thinking about sweets and gets distracted, making him easily defeated by his father. Then, one of his father's servants arrives and says there's good and bad news. Pastry's father tells him to speak the good news first, and he does. The good news is that thanks to Pastry's guidance, they achieved an excellent grain harvest. And the bad news? The soldiers failed to eliminate the bandits who invaded a neighboring town, and now those bandits are coming toward their region. Pastry's father is worried, as they will probably destroy the crops and kill many people when they arrive. Pastry says there are about 50 bandits, and they must prepare, as the bandits will arrive in approximately 2 months. Pastry ponders and says that even if they join the 3 villages in the region, they will have at most 30 men, and it will be difficult to stop them with just that. At some point, the blonde guy sees Pastry's serious expression, and in his thoughts, he says that's the look of a future leader, someone who wants to defend his family and neighbors. But what he doesn't know is that Pastry is angry about the possibility of losing the wheat he'll use to make his sweets. Pastry, very angry, says in his thoughts that he will cut down anyone who tries to ruin his dream of creating a land of sweets. The guy only thinks about making sweets. Man. The blonde guy says they have a chance. His instinct is telling him to bet on Pastry, and the Lord asks him what he means by that. He responds that it's obvious, they should baptize Pastry so that he can use magic and help in the fight against the bandits. His father resists a little, but eventually agrees, even though it's a bit early, since the boy is only 9 years old, and normally the coming of age ritual happens at age 11. Later, he tells Pastry's mother that he will do this, leaving her very worried. Says she would like Pastry to live his childhood more and that it's not fair that he has to undergo the ritual at such a young age. But his father stamps his foot and says he will do it, because if he doesn't, they might all end up in trouble. She resists a lot, but eventually accepts. A few days later, they go Pastry says goodbye to his friends and then his father uses teleportation magic. Pastry arrives in the city and is very surprised by the fruits there. Since there's nothing like that in his region, he starts to fantasize about the various sweets he could make with all those fruits. His father says he will buy whatever he wants after the completion of the passage ritual. And after that, they proceed to the church. The priest receives them and is surprised to learn that such a young boy is the one to perform the ritual. But he accepts it. He makes the preparations and finally, the ritual is about to begin. Basically, he is tied and strapped to a chair and drinks a strange and bitter liquid. For a few hours or days, he will be blindfolded and isolated from any external contact until his magic manifests. And soon the ritual begins. Pastry's father thought it wouldn't last more than a few hours, just like it happened to him. However, it has been more than a day and still nothing. His father starts to worry, thinking it's been tough for Pastry. But that's not the case. He has been spending all that time thinking about the different types of sweets he could make with those apples he saw in the city. Eventually, Pastry finally manifests his magic, and the ritual is concluded. His father comes to talk to him and is very happy, saying that he did very well. He meditated for 2 full days and was able to manifest a large amount of magic. And after that, the ceremony is concluded with a kind of magical scroll, and now, Pastry is officially an adult and is recognized by the church. Now finally, he can use magic without any hindrance. The priest says that he has received a practically unique power in modern times. And there are few records of someone who has managed to attain such a large amount of magic. After that, he pays the priest and they leave. Finally, for Pastry, the time has come for him to choose the fruits he would like to take home. He picks some apples but is very indecisive about which ones to choose. Finally, he makes his choice and they leave. At this moment, that priest appears, and we see that he's a rascal. He complains about receiving only silver coins and calls Pastry's father poor, also saying that such a trifling amount of money won't be enough to keep him silent. Mark my words, I'm sure this rascal priest will cause problems in the future. Then, we are shown that a village has been completely destroyed by the bandits who are coming towards Pastry's fief. And thanks to this, his father is organizing everything for their defense. He has gathered all the residents in one place to avoid isolated attacks. He has also blocked the wells of the neighboring villages so that the bandits have no supplies and only have one place to attack, which is exactly where they are, thus making defense easier. Everyone is working hard to defend against the bandits' attack. At a certain point, he receives news that the bandits will arrive sooner than they thought. Pastry hurries and calls his friends to collect many stones to be ready before the attacks. They spend the day collecting until, at the end of the day, the boys spot a large group of bandits coming towards them. They run to the city and warn the adults that the bandits are very close. Upon hearing this, Pastry's father wastes no time and sends his blonde assistant to reconnoiter the bandits. Meanwhile, Pastry is working on a plan for the children to implement during the attack, since they can't be on the front line. We return to Pastry's father, and the blonde guy uses a tracking skill to see where and how many bandits there are. He says he detected at least 70 bandits, and they are heading towards their camp. They also noticed that these aren't common bandits, they are actually a gang of EX Knights, and therefore, they are very skilled in combat. They quicken their pace and head towards the location. Upon arrival, they quickly dispatch several of the supposed bandits. This leads to some casualties, which facilitates the defense of the fief. After that, they quickly run back to the fief, luring the bandits to follow them. Upon reaching the village, Pastry's father passes close to the wall they built, and Pastry puts his plan into action. He takes some children who are skilled with slings, and they start throwing stones at the bandits. They keep throwing until the leader of the bandits realizes it's a trap and starts climbing the wall to go after the children to stop the attack. He climbs up and the villagers try to stop him with scythes and agricultural tools. But unfortunately, it doesn't work, and the rascal EX Knight manages to get over the wall and jumps inside. Once inside, he starts beating up all the villagers who try to prevent him from reaching the children. He causes great damage, and meanwhile, the children keep throwing stones at the scoundrel bandits. The leader gets furious with them and cowardly quickly goes to attack one of the children. Fortunately, or unfortunately, Pastry steps in front and ends up receiving the sword strike in front of her. The least bad thing is that it was in the arm and won't cause major complications. The cowardly bandit takes Pastry hostage and warns the people not to come closer, or he will harm the boy big time. Pastry doesn't know what to do, but at a given moment, he notices a bandit lying on the ground with his eyes burned from the flaming stone. That hit him. Pastry then gets an idea. He uses a spell to transfer the bandit's injury to all the other bandits there. It works perfectly, and soon, they all start rolling in pain, with their eyes burning, quickly defeated by Pastry. Then, it also shows us the bandits who were captured being taken to some sort of shed to wait until the capital folks arrive to take them away. Pastry's father talks to his right-hand man, saying it's best to send them to the capital. This way, the countess would receive credit for having captured them, instead of just driving them away, as actually happened. He thinks that doing it this way will earn him a great reward from her, and she would get credit for having captured them. To him, it seems fair, since the region where he lives is very barren, and they need resources to rebuild the villages the bandits destroyed. Some time later, he makes a list of those who helped during the battle to give them a reward. First is Glassage, a strange name. For his bravery and courage, he is gifted a spear and a silver coin, and the young man thanks them. Next up are Marcarolo and Luminito, those friends of Pastry. Pastry's father says both served very well as his assistants. Because of that, each of them will receive a sword and a bag of barley. Afterwards, the two of them head home, finding the bag of barley they received to be heavy. Soon, Pastry appears. He praises them and says they did really well in the battle. Soon, they arrive at Mark's house. His younger siblings say he's amazing, and his mother is overjoyed that he's come back safely. Afterward, they go to Lumi's house. Her grandfather hugs her and says his granddaughter is truly amazing. After this, he says they should celebrate, and a party with many people begins. At one point, Pastry starts daydreaming about all the sweets he'll be able to make during these times of peace. While he's lost in his thoughts, Mark and Lumi slip away and start talking. Mark asks what happened to the bandits, and Lumi says they were put in a shed. The boy suggests they should go take a look at them, and soon Lumi agrees, if this doesn't go wrong, I'm an astronaut. They head to the shed, but the guards stop them, saying it's not a place for children. Afterward, Mark picks up some stones from the ground and throws them at some woods next to the shed. The guards hear it and hurry to see what happened. In this moment, Mark and Lumi slip inside the shed where the bandits are held. Inside, they come face to face with the bandit leader, who instills fear in them just with a look. The bandit says the sword on Mark's belt belongs to him and asks where he got it. Mark says it was a reward. The bandit puts on a show and says he'll surely be in a grave when they hand him over, so he'd like to teach the next owner how to use that sword properly. He says that if it's used correctly, he could even use magic, and of course, this captures Mark's eyes, as he's always wanted to use magic like Pastry. But obviously, this is a trap, and Lumi warns him and tells them to leave. However, Mark is desperate for power and does as the bandit asks. The rascal says he must say some magic words, but they're very dangerous, so he asks Mark to come closer so his friend won't hear. Like a duck, Mark approaches him, and in the meantime, the bandit loosens his ropes. When Mark gets close, he gets kicked in the stomach, and the bandit frees himself. He grabs the sword and runs to attack Lumi. Obviously, she can't defend herself and receives a serious cut to her side. At this moment, the guards arrive, and the bandit leader takes Mark hostage. He grabs a horse and speeds away with the boy. At this moment, Pastry arrives and tells the guards to take care of Lumi. Outside, he asks the direction the bandit went and quickly sets off after the rascal. As Pastry goes after the bandit, he starts thinking of strategies on how he could defeat him. At this moment, we see that Pastry's father has been informed that his son is after the bandit, and he decides to go after him too. However, his assistant advises against it, saying he should stay and try to control the situation. The blonde kid says he'll go himself since he can track him down more easily using his tracking abilities. We switch back to the bandit, and we notice that one of Pastry's traps work, causing the bandit to fall. Immediately, Pastry arrives and stands in front of Mark to defend him. He recalls his father's sword training and attacks the bandit. The bandit comments that Pastry's skills are not bad for a kid. The bandit already knows that Pastry can transcribe wounds, so he is careful not to let Pastry see any cuts. He advances towards Pastry, who ends up trapped. At one point, the bandit attacks so strongly that he breaks Pastry's sword and would soon deliver a final blow to the boy. At least, that's what it seems, but but you'll understand what happened in a moment. The anime cuts to another scene, and we see the blonde kid searching for Pastry. At some point, he finds the trail of Pastry's horse and then finds his broken sword. Thinking that the boy had perished, he doesn't know how to break the news to his friend. But to his surprise, upon arrival, he finds Pastry sitting on his mother's lap. He shouts out. Pastry's father says that he returned a while ago and that he has already taken Mark to his house. The blonde kid is shocked because he was sure that the boy had met his end. Afterward, Pastry's father asks him to explain exactly what he did to escape the bandit and avoid the watchful eye of his assistant. Pastry tries to dodge the question, saying it's a complicated situation and hard to explain. His father gets angry and demands that he explain it right away. Pastry then sees no alternative and admits that he copied his father's teleportation magic and used it on himself. They are impressed because this way he can copy the magic of anyone. The boy is almost like a Kakashi. His father, angry, says that from now on, he is forbidden to tell anyone that he can use other people's magic, because if the Empire finds out, they might use the boy as a weapon. He also says that he should not use teleportation frequently because it's very dangerous, and he could end up inside the ground if he's not careful. The next day, Pastry goes to talk to Mark and notices that the boy is very sad. Pastry asks why, and the boy responds that it's because of him that Lumi got hurt and that if he had listened to her, none of this would have happened. Pastry comforts him and says he should go and apologize to her if he's really sorry. The boy agrees and they go to visit their friend. They arrive, and Lumi seems to be doing well. She asks why they're visiting. Pastry asks how she's doing, and she says she's improving. Afterward, Pastry says he'll be in the kitchen for a while and leaves her alone with Mark. She asks why he's so down. Before he can respond, we see Pastry using ingredients like apples, sugar, and butter. We return to Lumi and Mark, and the boy has trouble opening up to her. Finally, he gathers his courage and apologizes for causing her injury because he didn't listen to her. The girl promptly says it's okay, and then a delicious apple pie aroma fills the room, and Pastry appears with a delicious apple pie. He says now that Mark has apologized, they should eat to celebrate. They take the first bite and say that the pie is absolutely amazing. They begin eating non-stop. But at some point, Lumi's father appears and seems really angry at Mark. He says it was him who hurt his dear daughter and he must face the consequences. However, he was just intimidating the boy, and he says that as compensation, Mark will have to marry his daughter when he's older. He says it's a good opportunity since his daughter is a tomboy and would never be able to get a man otherwise. He asks her if she liked the idea, and Lumi, thinking about eating, nonchalantly says it's no problem. Mark is desperate. Afterward, Lumi offers a piece of pie to her father, and Pastry takes one too. As expected, he finds it incredible, and when Mark asks about his piece, she says that everything belongs to the husband belongs to the wife, so she'll keep the last piece. Well, here we see that he's in trouble, and you should all be careful when getting married. Pastry's father saying they don't have any money and need resources to rebuild the villages that were damaged. They also need food to sustain the people while they rebuild. He mentions that if they could catch the bandit leader who escaped, they could get at least 200 gold coins for him. He also says that the remaining ruffians are not even worth 5 coins. They try to figure out a way to get money and start brainstorming. Later, Pastry plays with his friends and shares the money problem with them. Pastry asks how Lumi's wound is, and she says she's doing well, just feels a bit of pain. Mark suggests she take it easy, and at that moment, Pastry laughs, saying they really make a nice couple. This makes Mark angry, and he says this joke isn't funny. Then, Mark admiringly comments on Pastry's magic and asks him to teach them how to use it. First, Pastry gives them a demonstration. He asks the two of them to draw something they like on the ground. After they draw, Pastry uses his rewriting magic to create a copy of the drawings and transfer them onto their skin, creating a sort of magic tattoo. Then, Lumi asks him if he can do the opposite. Instead of copying a drawing onto someone, could he copy another person or object to create something like a portrait? Pastry finds this idea amazing and wondered why he had never thought of it. He thanks Lumi for the idea and runs off excitedly, certainly thinking of a way to make money. While his father was talking to his mother, Pastry returns with a piece of wood and says he has an idea on how they can make money. His father asks what the plan is, and Pastry asks if he remembers the attempts to arrange a marriage for Josie, his sister. His father remembers, but doesn't understand how they would make money with it. Pastry explains that thanks to his teleportation ability, he was able to take her to various places to present her. However, few people have this ability since they can't use magic. This is where Pastry's idea comes in. Pastry asks how best to introduce a daughter if they want to arrange a marriage for her. His father suggests that the most effective way is to have her participate in a royal ball in the capital, but transportation is dangerous and costs a lot of money. Pastry suggests that if they sold something like that, and shows them the piece of wood, with his mother on it. He puts magic into the board, and his mother's image appears in detail, almost like a photograph. They are all impressed, and Pastry says his idea is to sell photos of the girls for their introduction without them being present. This way, they could save a lot of money for the parents of the girls, and they would charge a much lower price than the expensive photographs in that world. His father finds the idea incredible and says it could work. The assistant mentions that people could discover Pastry's magic this way, but Pastry says they can't hide his magic forever, and he can claim that his magic is only used to create photographs. His father agrees and goes back to talking to his assistant. Meanwhile, Pastry's mother comes over quietly and asks if he can remove a wrinkle she saw in the photo. Some time later, Pastry and his father go to the Countess Reedy's castle to seek a reward for dealing with the bandits she let escape. They are received by the guards and are soon admitted. The Countess from above begins mockingly, asking if they came to reprimand her for failing to deal with the bandit threat. Her assistant tells her not to fear the reprimand of any nobleman. She agrees and says she will just flatter him and send them away. Then, Pastry and his father arrive in the room where she is. She greets them and says it's a pleasure to receive Lord Morton and his son. She introduces herself as Countess Reedy's. Pastry's father returns the pleasantries and expresses his gratitude for having a moment with the Countess. She talks about Pastry and comments on his charm. Then, she invites them to have tea. Pastry is impressed with all the sweets he sees on that table and gets really excited. The Countess says they prepared the best quality sweets and honey tea for their visit. Pastry's father thanks her and mentions that her teas are well known even in the royal capital. He takes a sip and says it's really delicious, and then Pastry picks up a cookie and takes a bite. The Countess watches him, expecting him to be delighted, but instead, the boy makes a dissatisfied face. Thinking to herself, she mentions that usually, children get excited to eat her sweets, and she doesn't understand why Pastry is making such a face. Then he drinks the tea, and his expression isn't much better. After that, the Countess mentions that his father's farms stand out even in such arid lands. Pastry's father says that it's all thanks to taking his son's advice, but the Countess doesn't believe him and calls him humble. Then she finally speaks to Pastry and comments that he must be proud to have a father like his. Pastry seizes this opportunity and agrees, saying he is very proud of his father. He then becomes serious and mentions that the estate his father worked so hard to build recently suffered a terrible attack. He explains that they were attacked by hundreds of bandits, and even children like him were forced to take up arms and fight. The Countess, thinking to herself, admits she never thought the boy would bring up such a topic. She tells him that it's splendid to see him assuming the responsibilities of nobility at such a young age. Pastry continues, saying that when they interrogated the bandits, they claimed to have come from the region of Retesvale, which is the Countess's territory, and she should have dealt with them. The Countess attempts to play dumb and asks if this is true. Pastry then plays his final card. He has a sword he took from the bandits, which belongs to the Countess's army and was likely taken from a night when the bandits passed through. Pastry mentions that if she can't remember, that's fine, and he'll hand the bandits over directly to the royal capital, where an official investigation will likely reveal that the Countess was responsible for all the damage. Pastry puts pressure on her, and she has no choice but to negotiate a generous reward for them. The Countess starts offering 100 gold coins, but Pastry refuses immediately, saying he wants a bit more. She offers 130, and he rejects it right away, until she offers 150, and finally, he accepts. The Countess, thinking to herself, remarks that this kid is not normal. Usually, parents handle negotiations in such situations, and she starts to believe that their estate's success really stems from the boy. Pastry counts the coins and tells his father they have exactly 150 coins. They thank her, and Pastry apologizes for his impudent remarks, saying it was necessary. She says he hasn't introduced himself yet, and Pastry promptly introduces himself and mentions that it was a pleasure to meet her. She asks if she can ask him a question. Pastry confirms, and she asks what he thought of the tea, as he made a disapproving face when he first tried it. Pastry says there's no problem with the tea, it was very good. However, he adds that the cookies weren't a good match since they were too sweet and overpowered the tea's flavor. He advises her to pair the tea with lighter sweets to enhance the tea's flavor even more. She compliments his refined palate and is astonished by everything he said. Pastry's father gives him a light cuff on the head and apologizes for his son's impudence. Pastry quickly apologizes to her and, as a gesture of apology, takes out a small handkerchief and uses his magic to create a portrait of the Countess. She is very surprised and says it's wonderful. What happens next, we'll discover together in the next video. Did you enjoy today's episode? Then don't waste any time and give that like and subscribe, as it directly supports our work. And as always, for those who are truly dedicated and watch until the end, I've left an amazing video here. It tells the story of Lucille, a healer who, after falling into a pit on Earth, found himself in a world of fantasy and magic. Click on the screen and check it out. Sound good? Until next time, farewell.